Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV.
Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, episode 44. I'm Simon Furman.
And I'm Andrew Wildman.
You forgot that for a moment there, didn't you?
I did. I just suddenly got distracted. My
hell
mind
am I?
went somewhere else. I went off for a walk somewhere.
Yeah, and we're off to a great start.
God. Focus, Wildman. Come on. Focus.
So as we were just telling our Prime viewers, we're going to be continuing last podcast's chat about sort of 2018, 2019, then run up to lockdowns and things, just because there was a lot going on then, and it didn't all fit into one podcast.
And that's quite a long time ago now. I mean, it seems like 5 minutes ago, but...
Mm. But, well, yeah, it's best part of 10 years ago.
Yeah, knocking on for that. But, you know, a different age, pre-COVID, you know, back in the...
Yes.
Different eon or whatever.
It does feel like a different time. Anyway, before we jump in with that, I just wanted to kind of drop in a bit of sad news that Barry Tomlinson, who was the group editor at IPC magazines, or certainly ran the boys division and wrote for all sorts of comics like Roy of the Rovers and Tiger and many others. Barry Tomlinson, who basically got me my first comics job on Scream. He was one. He and Gil Page were the sort of managing editors of the boys department, and I got recruited as the sub-editor on Scream because I'd met Barry and Gil through my job on competitions department. So, yeah, he really got me my break. And very sadly, the news has come that Barry has passed away. So I just wanted to make a little tribute to someone who was, you know, a real old school comics guy who, you know, sort of knew the business inside and outside. And really, I learned a lot from him. And, of course, Gil and, of course, Ian Rimmer, that really stood me in great stead for, you know, everything that followed. And being recruited for Scream was the sort of the starting point of everything. So, you know, very sad to hear that he's passed away. Yeah, you know, condolences to his family.
Yeah, I didn't know. I had met Barry. I wouldn't say I know him, but I had met him from kind of back in the day, because we've been at this kind of stuff for so long now that we are that generation of artists and writers who just about straddle those two kind of ages of comics, especially for Brits, where it was very much the dusty old streets of London, smell of, you know, paper pulp and ink, and it was very, very, very different, very kind of analog, old school British age with old school writers and artists and comics that came off of the back of, you know, the proper London press and Scotland, obviously. Prior to then, the kind of far more American influenced comics that then came along and, you know, kind of became the standard really in terms of style and intention. But those old comics days were very valuable. I think for anybody like us who had an experience of that before it kind of died away, I think it was very, very valuable, a very real experience, and meeting some amazing creatives who, many of which I think still surpass the talents of most of the people that there are around today. Certainly the illustrators, I think.
You know, the comics industry, of course, has changed, but I still adhere to those sort of old school traditions that, you know, I learnt back then, because they were fundamental. You know, they were the basic things. Engage your readership, make them sort of loyal through the editorial that you put out, you know, and they were very good at it at IPC of kind of creating an atmosphere where you felt you you were part of the team almost. You were a
Yeah.
sort of, that there was a interface between you and the people creating the comic. And whether that was a sort of fictional editor like Tharg or Ghastly McNasty, or just readers' letters and feedback, and put your art in and things, they knew how to sort of engage with the audience. And the sort of the level of professionalism meant that these things appeared regularly, which was so important. And I think there was a stage with modern comics where deadlines and sort of schedules kind of went to hell a bit. Comics would come out, especially kind of in that image era, whenever they were
Yeah.
ready. But unless you bring a comic out regularly, once a week, once a month, whatever it is, you lose your readership. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's like we were saying last time about The Vigilant. If that had come out on a regular basis, with a sort of degree of we know when the next issue's coming out, it could have had more legs. But that sort of scattershot thing that happened with it sort of doomed it.
I think it was, in terms of comics, certainly American comics, I think it was because comics creators became subject to the cult of celebrity or whatever, with all our egos were kind of inflated, and so everything was on our terms, or so we thought. I mean, it isn't, because that will kill a book, like you say, as opposed to those kind of guys back in the day, and even us, and even in the earlier days of the current sort of comics that we have now. But there was that thing about, I've just got a good job to do, I just need to get on with it. And deadline was absolutely key. That was almost like the schoolmaster standing over you with a cane, saying, get it done on time.
Well, we lived in absolute fear when we were doing Transformers and Marvel comics for Marvel UK of missing a print deadline, because it would have been catastrophic. I mean, really, it sort of would have dented everything, and the ripple effect would have affected everything, just missing a slot. And so, we were always poised, when we were doing original material, if there was ever a case, it came close a couple of times where we couldn't get the original strip ready, we would have to have gone with some kind of reprint and still got the issue out.
Yeah.
So but it was almost unthinkable that would happen.
Yeah. Deadlines.
Indeed. Anyway, so R.I.P. Barry.
Yeah.
But yes, let's talk on about where we were. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was something that bubbled up during that time, which was Transformers 84.
Yeah.
Which, and that was an interesting one, because it came out of what I thought was nowhere almost. Transformers hit its 35th anniversary, and IDW contacted me and said, we'd like to do a sort of more traditional, fan-friendly one-shot for the 35th anniversary, something that harks back to the very original comic.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether they had the name Transformers 84 or that was something I came up with, but they just wanted a one-shot that sort of tied back in very much to those original few Marvel comics, the first issue particularly. And I thought, okay, well, this is fun. I'll try and come up with, and I went back to the original Marvel Comics issue 1 of Transformers, and thought, God, there's a lot of gaps here, because they hyper condensed the start of the story in the way that, like, Spider-Man's origin plays out in 10 pages back in the original Amazing Fantasy. The origin of Transformers is, well, a lot happens on Cybertron in about 3 pages to set up them crash landing on Earth. So I thought, God, there's a lot of gaps here that I can exploit, if you like, to tell a
Mm.
story.
Mm.
So I came up with a story that sort of slotted between the gaps. And then I thought, wow, I wonder if we could loop something from the UK into this and tie that up and
Yeah.
make it half UK retrospective, half US. And there'd been that first story that Steve Parkhouse had written called Man of Iron
Mm.
that always felt a little adrift from the the stuff that followed it, only because they were supposed to be self-contained and non-impactful. But I thought, well, maybe we can actually tie that in a bit, and so I came up with a story that jumped back in time to the original crash landing that has happened later in Man of Iron. So yeah, it was one of those. It was quite ambitious, and I wondered whether Chris and the editors at IDW would shoot it down. But no, they really liked it, and so I did this one-shot story. Great fun. Guido Guidi was the artist, and he did he's a real chameleon of an artist who can, as we saw on Regeneration One,
Yeah.
even though it sort of looks like Guido, he kind of somehow adapted his style so it didn't jar with yours.
Yeah, and obviously helped by Baskerville as well. But yes,
Yeah,
it was a good handover. Yeah.
and so Guido was doing the art, and we got him to do it in a slightly retro-y Marvel style. And then we got JP to color it in a slightly retro-y Marvel style. So
Yeah.
it was brilliant, and it just turned out really well. One of those ones where you kind of originally think, oh, does anybody care about this? Because it's just story within gaps in existing story. But it actually worked really well and went down well enough, this one shot, that IDW turned around and said, let's do a Transformers 84 limited series that follows on from this.
Yeah.
And that was really nice, unexpected as well. I just thought it was going to be a one shot anniversary thing, but I think it went down really well. And yeah, we got to do another 4 issues that also laced in and out of those early Marvel issues. So we had the whole thing of the Shockwave fighting the Dinobots, which is briefly referenced
Yeah.
as something that happened back in the day. No longer could we name check it as the Savage Land, but anyway, it was still laced into those original Marvel stories, and yeah, it was great fun, and we got Guido and JP back, and yeah, had a real blast with it, and it was lovely to do because it felt so apart from whatever else IDW were doing.
Yeah.
And it felt like something we could have run with, really. There was so much story we didn't get to, we could have told, especially on what was happening on Cybertron while the Ark and its occupants are all kind of out of action on Earth.
There's almost an unlimited opportunity, really, to dive into gaps, isn't there? What? Just backtracking a bit. What was the thing about Savage Lands? You couldn't name check it as.
Oh, well, originally it's that the bit where Shockwave fought the Dinobots is later identified as the Savage Land, hence
Yeah.
dinosaurs and things. But of course, that was when Transformers was a Marvel comic, and so
Yeah.
they guest starred Spider-Man. They had other Marvel, like Roxxon, the oil company from Marvel Comics, was in Transformers, and there were other connections. But of course, now once it was an IDW comic, we couldn't, and I think anyway that had all been sort of rolled over, really. But yeah, we couldn't call it the Savage Land anymore.
Right, because that was Marvel badge
Yeah.
name thing. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, when you look at those early Marvel comics, it's very immersed in the Marvel universe in certain aspects.
Yes, which I was thought was a bit strange.
Yeah, but hey, they put Spider-Man in issue 3, and I guess that was it's in the Marvel universe.
I mean, they had other toy books, but they didn't put those in the Marvel universe, like Barbie and things like that.
No,
They were Marvel universe, were they?
I know. I mean, in a way, it's incredible because you wouldn't have thought they'd have thought that was a good idea themselves,
No.
particularly. But yeah, you know, Spider Man's in issue 3. They name check the Savage Land. There might even be a mention of Shield. I can't remember. Anyway, there are things that pepper it with small references to Marvel institutions and settings.
Yeah. I suppose they probably think maybe it pulls a few more readers into Transformers because they see
Yeah,
Spider-Man's in it.
I'm sure. I'm sure it
Yeah.
didn't hurt.
No. No.
You know, they used to put Spider-Man into everything, didn't they? Or
Yeah.
X-Men or whatever.
Wolverine. How many times did Wolverine appear in
Oh,
places that had no relevance
I
whatsoever?
know. And then you get that second wave of Marvel UK original comics that had X-Men in every issue plastered across the covers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was all about X-Men. It was all about mutants. That period of time, because they were so big and so successful because of what became the Image guys. They were really successful. Everybody wanted to guest star Wolverine or whoever. Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we did want to do more Transformers 84. I mean, IDW, I think could have gone there eventually, but of course we weren't long before. You know, IDW. We come to the end of the IDW era, so you know, strangely it wasn't going to happen for a lot of reasons. But you know, I mean, the IDW era started in 2005 and ran to something like 2022. So, you know, it was still a good, really good,
Yeah.
you know, tenure, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And so
very definitely.
we won't talk about that because we're not there yet. So, so anyway, that's Transformers '84. What was going on? Else was going on with you?
What else I got? I see. I can't really remember what I spoke about last time. I crossed a couple of things off my list, kind of retrospectively. I briefly mentioned Norman Pickle Stripes, which then led to the me storyboard of the Clangers, which is still a high point in my career.
Brilliant.
Yeah, a lot of live action storyboarding going on. The Innocent. I don't know whether you ever saw The Innocent. It was a
I
Netflix
didn't
show.
know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was really good. That was directed by Farron Blackburn, who I worked with on the Fades and on Doctor Who. But that was good. It got Jared Harris and Guy Pearce in it.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's worth
I'll have
checking
to
out.
check it out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonder if it's still on Netflix.
I'm sure it is. Isn't everything? Yeah. So that was good. I can't remember what other live action stuff I was doing around about that time. But in animation, the other thing I worked on, which I don't think I mentioned, was Horrid Henry. I don't know whether you're aware of Horrid Henry.
I'm aware of it. I didn't realise you'd worked on it.
Yeah, which was kind of an interesting thing. So in terms of the storyboarding for kids animation that I was doing, um, as with a lot of kids animation these days, it's all CG or in some way computer generated. So I'd done a lot of storyboarding on that, and as we know, Mad Hatter Chronicles that we both worked on, that was CG. So I'd done that kind of thing. But then when I went to work for the factory, the people who did the Clangers and Norman Pickle Stripes, both of those shows are stop motion, so they're with models, kind of like Wallace and Gromit, that kind of thing. So it was really interesting to do storyboarding on a different kind of animation. But then the other thing with when I was asked to work on Horrid Henry. That's proper old school like 2D animation. So it's kind of very flat. So when you're storyboarding it, you can't track and pan very well. You can't rotate cameras, all that kind of stuff like you can with CG and like you can with stop motion, because it has a 3D space, either real or digital. But with 2D, it doesn't. So that was a really tricky one to get my head around. It really made me realize how difficult and how amazing it was. All that kind of animation that was done as traditional 2D forever until stop motion and then eventually CG came up. So that was quite a discipline to do. Hell of a lot of work boarding in animation. But then the other thing I did mention last time was Shane the Chef, my own TV show that I well, it was originally inspired by an idea that my wife Leslie had, which I then ran with Rota Treatment. Then through a mutual colleague was put in touch with Simon Jarrett, Bob the Builder writer. We then fleshed it all out, and eventually, after many years, it got picked up. I mean, the first version that I pitched to anybody was 2005, I think. And then it wasn't until 2018 that it then finally appeared. It doesn't always take that long to get an animation off the ground, but this one certainly did. But they're so expensive to produce. One of the things, even once we'd got it optioned, and the company that were managing it, Ho Ho Entertainment, the big kind of mountain to climb then is getting enough funding in place to make the show. So standard kind of kids show is 52 episodes. That's just a traditional thing. 52 episodes. I don't know how long they were. 20 minutes? I don't know if they were 20 minutes, 11 minutes. Can't remember now. But that's £4 million straight away that you've got to find. And it's like the first 80% is kind of relatively easy to find with investors, and then getting a little bit of seed money from the first broadcaster that steps on board and all that kind of thing. But that last 10% is just, they're just like begging, borrowing and stealing for anybody that they can possibly nail down until they can eventually get the green light and go into production. It did run massively over budget for all sorts of unforeseen, complicated kind of reasons and situations, but yeah, we made it. So that was incredible. So I was in and out of Cardiff for a year working on that, just designing the hell out of it, all the characters, all the environments and the props and everything, which I'd absolutely love doing that, just like world building, really. Even for a little kids show like that, it's just so much fun to define the kind of key aesthetic of it and then design everything inside of that key aesthetic, so that it all fits together as a world. So yeah, still very proud of that one.
Absolutely.
Were you in 2018? Were you doing any TV stuff at that point?
I don't think so. I think by now Matt Hatter had finished, and my involvement with the Bear Grylls thing, that still I don't think has come out, had sort of run its course as well. I wrote one sort of extended episode for that, but I have a feeling that was the end as far as my involvement with Platinum went. So but yeah, no TV advertising, no TV animation, but like I say, a lot of comics, because as well as Transformers 84, I had Robotech,
right,
which was a franchise I didn't really know that well. Obviously, it's a sort of Japanese one that got an American release. And it was just a Titan again, always Titan. One thing I've noticed with this sort of trawl back through our careers is that every now and then I end up doing something for Titan. I've just finished Skull Island for them, and then there's Robotech and many other things that and it's great. It's very nice to have that working relationship with them, and occasionally they'll turn around and go, "Oh, we've got this." And what they had was Robotech, and it had been started by another writer, American one, whose name escapes me now. And he did the first 4 issues and then kind of bailed. And so they came to me and said, "Would you like to take it on from issue 5?" And I just thought, yeah, okay, why not? Don't know much about Robotech, except the one little fact I knew about Robotech was that the character of Jetfire in Transformers, through some strange licensing thing, was a Robotech design that that Hasbro owned. I don't know. Someone can write in, I hope, and tell us what that link was. But it was weird that this character that they called either Jetfire or Skyfire was a Robotech jet design.
Okay.
And why it became a Transformer, how that happened, I'm not sure. Some strange toy licensing quirk. So that was all I knew about Robotech, really, that Jetfire looked like one of their fighter jets from it. So it took an immediate amount of, thankfully, internet-based catch-up with what Robotech was and the gist of the TV series. I bought a few sort of books on it, and it was kind of fun. It has that sort of slightly, because it's really a Japanese anime series, dubbed or adapted. It has some sort of quirky Japanese stuff about it, like sort of the girl character in it is a singer, and so sort of she's occasionally bursting into song, and so there were bits like that, but the basic premise of it was really fun, and it had transforming elements to it, so I kind of felt on comfortable ground there. But obviously it was much more human character based, and I ended up having a really good time with Robotech. It ran to, I think, issue 24 or 5, and it ended up being quite a body of work. And I met the company that owned it was called Harmony Gold, and the guy I dealt with there, Tommy Yoon, was such a lovely guy, so enthusiastic and sort of steeped in Robotech. And I met him a couple of times at conventions, and we got on really well. And it was just a pleasure working on it. It was one of those ones where we started to get our own momentum going with it. And, we had, and there were sort of events. There was a free comic book day issue of Robotech. So, it really had some, from being what I thought would just be a few issues, it rolled out into quite a chunk of work, something like sort of 5 trade paperbacks. So,
wow.
It was really, I know, it was really enjoyable. And I kind of miss Robotech, strangely. I got deeply into it. So, and as you do with these things, when it sort of finishes, they finished it and they were going to relaunch it with a different creative team. But that kind of got hit by COVID.
Right.
And I don't think it happened, or if it happened, it didn't get continued. I think they were going to call it Robotech Remixed or something like that. And I get it, these things need a reboot just to get a new readership going. But I did enjoy working on it.
And so was Robotech like a toy line that then was a cartoon, or was it just a cartoon initially, or what was?
I'm not sure which came first, the toys. There certainly were, from the day, I found a few at conventions, sort of action figure toys and the ships and things. So there was a toy line, very much. I have a feeling it was probably toy line then. I think it was possibly Bandai originally.
Okay.
It was it was toy line and then accompanying TV series.
Yeah.
again, there are people out there who know this stuff more than me do, even though probably at the time I could have answered all these questions just because I picked up so many kind of almost textbooks on Robotech and all the stuff.
So was this an 80s thing as well, or was it later?
80s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So is it going to be one of those situations where there are Transformers people and there are Robotech people, and never the twain shall meet unless it's a fight in the playground kind of thing?
Could be. I mean, it did have a proper fan base, very passionate. I think possibly more sort of a Japanese-based Japanese fan base.
Yeah.
But certainly, yeah, it has its, it had its built-in fan base, and the job was to try and pull new people into that as well.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the whole experience. It was good fun, and yeah, something. Like I say, it became a small body of work, and because normally even Skull Island is 8 issues and 2 trades, but this was 20 something issues and 5 trade paperbacks. So
yeah, that is a lot. When you put it in context with the original run of Transformers, and how it's just was only going to be a 4-issue limited series anyway.
yeah,
And then Regeneration 1 was only like 20 issues, wasn't it? So for then this kind of sudden thing to pop out of nowhere that you work on and you get that many issues out of it, that's amazing.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and so that was one thing going on. And I don't want to hog this. I'll just quickly go through a couple of the other things that were happening. One really weird thing was I did some work for the Jockey Club. Now, I think this came through Martin Griffiths.
Oh yeah.
He'd been contacted by them, and they wanted to do, bizarrely, a comic book called Magnificent Racehorses, a sort of factual. No, I know, but it was basically, it was a page per horse, if you like, or 2 pages, and it wasn't a story. It was, here's some details about this horse and anything that they accomplished. And so obviously the Jockey Club supplied all the raw materials, because I know nothing about horse racing.
No.
And I spun these into scripts that Martin could illustrate.
Yeah.
And this rolled out a bit further. It came out in this one shot that they were, I suppose, selling at race meetings or through the Jockey Club. And this one shot came out, but then I think it was for a Grand National. The Daily Star contacted us and said, we want a half-page strip for the Grand National edition of the Daily Star. So again, Martin and I did a little sort of a comic strip based around the Grand National that ran in the Daily Star. So yeah, it was
ran in the Daily Star.
Weird. Yeah, yes, literally, it was in the 4:30 at the Daily Star, but it was a very strange thing, and they came back for more. I was again pre-lockdown, and it didn't happen because of COVID. I started work on one called something Jockeys. It wasn't Magnificent Jockeys. It was going to be the same format, but about a handful, 10 or so, of the kind of key jockeys of the time.
Yeah.
And it was a weird thing. I'd learned more about horse racing in that sort of 6 months than I'd ever known. But it was a decently paid job, and I thought, why not? But it was a very strange one in my catalogue.
Yeah, I mean that is things like that. I mean, I have no idea how you got your head around that and what on earth you would write. But the advantage with those kind of jobs that come, that turn up and are not part of mainstream comics or whatever, is at least the money's good. Yes. So that you can sell your soul a bit and just say, yeah, I'll do that. That'll be all right.
Well, it almost worked on kind of more like advertising industry rates.
Yeah.
and that's obviously very appealing. And I think that's where it had come from, because Martin at the time was doing a lot of, advertising work,
Yeah.
either with Jeff for his agency or other agencies. So I assume it had come up through that, and that's how he'd sort of got roped in. And then he sort of said, well, look, we need a writer for this, and that's how I got roped in. But it was kind of fun, and I never mind these things that push me out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I don't know how you do it. I don't know. I mean, I've written 2 things, and that's it. I can't. I don't know how you do it. How do you just come up with all these so many ideas around the same product? I find absolutely mind blowing. But then to write something when someone's presented you with something which is just no way part of your world or understanding. I mean, it's research, but coming up with a narrative around that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I suppose it's just the tracks my brain runs along, That was one of the stranger things I've worked on, I guess, but it is nice to get out of your comfort zone and push yourself a bit.
Yeah.
There's always a way to, and it helps, I think, because I was an editor,
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
you understand how to you should be able to present pretty much anything in a sort of interesting way.
Yeah, I just do your research and then find the story. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Journalism, exactly. You can't just write bland facts. You have to find the story. So yeah.
And one other little weird one was that Marvel reprinted Brute Force.
Oh
This,
yeah.
the one series I thought will never end up in a trade paperback, because I mean it was a quirky thing of its time and 4 issues, not connected to anything else.
Yeah.
And it was this eco-themed. We've probably talked about it in previous podcasts. This idea of animals in exosuits, and it had a strong environmental theme to it. But I never thought in a million years Marvel would ever collect it. But 2 things happened with Brute Force, 3, I think. First of all, I think they cropped up bizarrely in an issue of Deadpool. I think some writer must have thought, oh, I'm going to put those weird characters from Brute Force in Deadpool. And then there was a documentary series on Disney Plus called Marvel 616 that did little vignettes of things from Marvel, and they did one whole program on Brute Force. And I was like, what? And then, yes, obviously inspired by this, and probably because Marvel at this point were owned by Disney, animals in exosuits must have looked a slightly more marketable thing.
Yeah.
And they brought out the trade paperback of Brute Force, and it was like, oh wow, this weird thing. And not that I thought it was a bad thing, but it was an oddball again in career terms. And suddenly it was sort of back in the public consciousness. Brute Force, who knew?
Yeah. But presumably just disappeared without trace now.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, I do think, funnily enough, it sort of prompted Marvel to make them. I think they appeared in some trading cards or something as well. It sort of reintegrated them a bit with a Marvel universe, as opposed to like.
Yeah, again, but we were saying earlier, you were saying about how Marvel, with the Transformers books, very much had them as, well, not to a great extent, but had it as part of the Marvel universe. So you'd have Spider-Man appearing in a Transformers comic. So they did the same thing with. Originally, did they do that with Brute Force? So was
No.
Brute Force? No, it was just a toy book.
I'd have to think about that, because I do wonder whether, the sort of, we used one of their, Marvel had these sort of slightly dodgy company entities like Roxxon.
Yeah.
I wonder whether we used one of those in it. I'd have to check back, but it's possible we used something like the corporate entity they're fighting is a Marvel corporate entity.
I suppose that's just a name thing, though. You can kind of quite easily take that out. But Deadpool, I mean, nice.
I know. Yeah. So, I mean, anything from there really is running up into, and we can talk about this either next time or another time, but the sort of the immediate kind of pre and into lockdown period was a strange time as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, kind of moving into, yeah, so there were a couple of TV shows that I was working on round about, when lockdown was happening, and Oxygen was very much part of lockdown for me, so that would be a good one maybe to leave and get into for our COVID episode.
Yes, our COVID episode. That's really going to pull them in, isn't it? Relive COVID era.
Yeah, there was a lot of creativity going on.
Well, there was. It didn't. My first thought was, well, that's my career on pause for however long lockdown is. But of course, the publishing industry kind of rolled on.
Yeah.
Comics kept coming out, and I was still reasonably gainfully employed during that time. And one of the things we haven't talked about is that in that period running up to COVID, the print edition of To the Death was coming out, so I was working on that, and we've spoken about that before. But in terms of, we got issue 10 out just before lockdown, and it probably would have destroyed it a bit if we hadn't. But yeah, we just sort of scraped it in under the wire.
Okay. Well, that'd be good stuff to start with then, whether that's next time or whatever, but the next chronological episode.
Yes.
We'll get into lockdown. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And anything before we go, or?
No, I don't think so. Other than I've very soon got the operation on my hand. 5th of May. So I'm going to be out of action, in terms of drawing for a little while.
Wow.
So so my wonderful G.I. Joe sketchbook patrons, I haven't mentioned that. I know there's some of them on here. So I'll be letting everybody know about that. Well, I'll have to take a little hiatus. I mean, hopefully it won't be too long, but it's definitely going to be out of action for, I don't know.
No.
Anything from 3 weeks to 3 months. Who knows?
Wow. Tricky.
I know.
But at least it won't
general anaesthetic as well. Oh my God, I haven't had a general anaesthetic.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Surprisingly, I would have thought that was a local job. But...
Yeah, I was assuming local and not looking forward to going through the experience of having that under a local anaesthetic. Because I've had local anaesthetic for long, difficult operations before. So I was thinking, okay, well, here we go. I'll just, get myself in the zone and it'll be all right. But yeah, and then they said general, and I was like, oh dear, I don't really know about that.
Yeah, bit worrying, but it won't stop us doing the podcast.
What, if I'm under general anaesthetic?
No. In your recovery period.
That is very true, yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll get a load of episodes in the bag then.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, Andrew, as always, been a pleasure, and good luck with the op.
Yeah, it's May the 5th. Don't know whether we'll probably get another one of these in before then, maybe.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Post op, do I have to start calling you Andrea Wildman?
I thought you told me you weren't going to mention that.
Yeah, your hand, it's as if. Yes, on that note.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for leaving everyone with that.
And thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.